So you're just going to go through all of the like board clauses.
And some of them are like old. I mean, like, but I'm going to go through them just in case anybody runs into them, because occasionally I do run into them. I'm like, whoa, that's an old one. But
Yeah.
if you saw it, at least a newer agent would know what the heck it was all about.
The thing that, and just if I can say this, the reason why I asked Tracy to do the clauses class is because I just did a home sale contingency with an agent from another brokerage, and the difference in our understanding of the home sale contingency clause was mind-blowing. And I've talked to other agents even within our brokerage and within our company, and their understanding of what a home sale contingency was. I mean, you can line up 10 different agents, and 10 different agents will give you 10 different perspectives on what they think a home sale contingency is, or how it works, or what the moving parts of it are.
I think that's true, as well as a escalation clause.
Say that again.
I think that, and an escalation clause.
Yes.
There's
yes.
a lot of misunderstanding on escalation clauses.
Yes, absolutely. So
okay,
I'll be quiet.
No, please. I want this class to be, everybody be involved and start talking. And if you see something you don't understand, speak up. Okay, so let's get started. First thing I want to show you guys is where you find your clauses. So if you're new to Keller Williams or new to real estate, we do have all your clauses that are all set up for you under templates in .loop. So if you go into templates and click on the little, two little things right there and go down to clauses, all the clauses are there. And if you want to add anything that is like a clause that you like, you can do that. If you're in a document or already in a loop and you need to add a clause into a loop, let's just say I go in here, I'm in a loop, I have additional terms and conditions. This happens to be the escalation one. But if I want to add something into my loop, when I click on the area where I can add, this is really hard to see because it's red on black, but that same two little pieces of paper are right there. So the first place I showed you where those were, I mean, you would have to copy and paste them in, but the easier solution would be to click on those little guys right there and either search for a clause. Let's just say I want the Radon clause, and then I hit the button right there and then just add it in, okay?
Tracy,
So,
real quick, for those that are not on .loop anymore and that are in command, is there a place in command that they put our clauses? Do you know?
I think it would be in DocuSign where you would find that clause. And
yeah, that's what I mean.
Yeah. I don't know because I'm sticking with .loop.
Yeah.
So
okay.
That is a good question that we'll find out because having your clauses at your fingertips is
crucial.
Super important.
Yeah.
Because when you're in a pinch and trying to write one fast and you can't remember, like this is the escalation clause, you are not going to remember all of that. Okay, so let's go to our clauses. All right, so move this over. So I'm just going to go through and Lisa and I were talking before Barbara and Marcia got on. Some of these clauses are old but you might still see them. So we're basically going to go through some of them and then just kind of discuss what they are. So the purchase contract that we use, the CBA purchase contract, does not give us a lot of space for clauses. It's very, very small. And they do that on purpose because they feel like our purchase contract is pretty well all-inclusive, but it's not. A lot of times there's times that we do need to insert a clause. So many times, if I were going to use, say, for example, the escalation clause, I mean, it's 4 paragraphs long. If you use the detailed one, I couldn't fit it in the space. So many times we have to say, see attached page with all additional terms and conditions as an integral part of this purchase contract. Basically, you're going to put that where you would put the term, and you're just going to direct them to where all of your additional terms and conditions are going to be located. And it will be an integral part of the purchase contract. A lot of people say, I don't know what to say when I have a counteroffer. So it would be, thank you so much for your offer. Buyers agree with all foregoing terms and conditions with the following changes. Then you're going to say 1, purchase price to be, closing date to be, possession to be, whatever you have to say to be. Why this is highlighted is that you always want to reiterate that all other terms and conditions remain the same. So we're changing A, B, C, and D, but everything else is going to remain the same. So only changes going forward on a purchase contract are going to happen. So let's go out into the country. Now I've got a well. So there's 2 different well water inspection contract clauses. And the first one's, you may use it. I don't think it's specific enough. And it basically says if the subject's premises water is obtained by a private well, they warn at the time of closing that there's sufficient quantities. Well, that's a really kind of gray one. So if I was a buyer's agent, I would not use this. If I was representing the seller, I'd be like fine with it. But if I represent the buyer, I really want to be more specific. And I want to say, buyer at buyer's expense shall have a 1-hour flow test conducted outside the house, from the outside house faucet. Such tests shall produce not less than 5 gallons per minute flow rate without fault, or this contract shall become null and void or negotiated. Such tests must be completed within 15 calendar days of acceptance. The 5 gallons is the minimum. I have seen anywhere from 5 to 8. And that's just so that if a normal household is using the water and everyone's taking a shower at the same time, they're able to. Radon clause. I don't know why anybody would use the radon clause, and here's why. Radon is specified in our purchase contract. It is one of the tests and inspections. So I guess if I had somebody who was just very, 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 very concerned about radon and said, Tracy, I will not, go forward with this contract unless I have a clause in there saying I can get out of it if radon's over 4.0 percuries. But we actually have on page 5 of our purchase contract, it says B is you're going to test for radon. So if I put that I'm going to be testing for radon in a specific clause, if I'm the seller, chances are, if my house isn't mitigated, chances are I'm going to have radon. And chances are I'm going to hold back from negotiating a purchase price anywhere from $1,000 to $1,500 because I know I'm probably going to have a radon system put in. But I wouldn't really know that I was going to do that if the agent hadn't put that clause in. So if you're a smart cookie and you don't have to, according to your buyers, I would leave the radon clause out because it is specified in our tests and inspections in our purchase contract. Does that make sense?
Yes, Tracy, real quick. When I've used the radon clause, I use it in a request to remedy, not necessarily in the purchase contract.
True. Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
So, yeah, you can copy and paste it and put right in there in the request to remedy. And that's a really good point, Lisa. A lot of these clauses you can put different places. It's not just in additional terms and conditions. This is going to be in counteroffers, request to remedies, things like that. Yes, absolutely. Waste disposal clause. So the on-site waste disposal shall conform to current state, county, municipal requirements. They should have the tanks pumped and cleaned, and size shall conform to today's on-site disposal standards. Who knows what the size of a disposal system, a sewer, a septic, what does it relate to? Is it the size of the house? Is it square footage?
Number of bathrooms.
No, that's what everybody thinks.
Oh.
Anybody? It's number of bedrooms. So it has to conform to the number of bedrooms because the number of bedrooms indicates the number of people that would be in the house. So chances are if I have a 6-bedroom house, I might have 6 people. Now 6 people could use 2 bathrooms easily. So bathrooms doesn't necessarily define the number of people that would be using the bathrooms.
And this is about septic tanks?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I don't do many rural properties, so I'm clueless about well and septic.
Well, now you learn. So that's why you come to these classes. So good for you. And then grandfathering is not permitted, so that if I had a house that had 2 bedrooms on it and I had a septic tank that was the size to fit a 2-bedroom house, I go out and I put a big addition onto my house, well, something's got to change. And if I tried to sell that house and they said, oh, well, I'm grandfathered in, no, you're not. That's not permitted, because it would no longer be sufficient for the number of bedrooms that you had.
How do you determine the size per bedroom?
You don't. We're going to call like Bill Sapsera or the county, or someone's going to come out and they determine the size.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Benchmark. A lot of people use benchmark. Benchmark's great when you're doing well or septic. They do radon too. They will test your water to make sure that it is clean. You can use the county, and the county is cheaper. However, the county takes a much longer time. So if you've got 10 days to get your inspections done, you may not be able to use the county depending on how backed up they are. And there's a lot of good places. That's just one that I use. Okay, condominium document review. So basically this paragraph is saying that we're going to have X amount of days, maybe 5 to 7 days to go and have the documents delivered for the condominium document review. And then there is a condominium checklist that is in .loop, and I'm sure it's in DocuSign as well, that basically says, I want to see this and this and this and this. 9 times out of 10, I will check off every single thing that I want to see. What do you think is the most important document, or one of the most important documents that you'll want to read on that condominium checklist?
HOA.
Financials.
Financials, HOA, good. There's one that's really important.
Uh-oh.
It's the minutes. And here is why the minutes are important. This actually happened in this office. The minutes were not received. And what happened was the house went into contract and they sent them everything but the minutes. They didn't ask for the minutes, all the financials, everything like that. And what had happened is right before this gal bought this condominium, in the minutes, they had voted that every person in the whole complex had to pay $1,000 for a roof reserve. And she didn't know about it. So sure enough, she gets into this condominium, the bill comes for $1,000, and it was a real, you didn't tell me, you didn't tell me, you didn't tell me. Well, if the minutes had been looked at and reviewed, she would have known that. So some of the little reports you may not think are important can be very, very important.
How does that not fall under special assessments in the contract?
Because it was just voted on before the contract had been put. They went into contract. She got.
Oh, it's a timing issue.
It was just a timing issue.
Okay.
So I'm just always.
Otherwise, it would, right?
Please?
I'm asking because I don't under. I was thinking that the special assessments clause would have covered you, but not necessarily.
No, not necessarily. And special assessments and condominium document reviews are completely different animals. A special assessment is actually, I don't like to call it a tax, but it is a tax on top of your taxes. So the special assessment is covering for the 30 years or whatever that the special assessment is for roads and sewers and development. It wouldn't be as specific, like a condominium probably wouldn't have a special assessment. That's more for a house. I don't think a condominium would ever have a special assessment.
Well, let's see. It had I read something when I went to buy a condo, and I asked for any changes to the condo bylaws that would require.
That would be perfect. But and when we have the condominium checklist, it's super easy. Just go down. You're going to attach it into the contract and just check off what you need to see.
Okay.
Okay.
Don't make a mountain out of a molehill.
Yeah. So FHA, you're just going to write in here purchase price. I very rarely ever see this anymore. Who knows what the only used to be? There were some more costs involved if you were the sellers accepting an FHA. There were mandated lending fees and mandated fees that the seller had to pay. What is the one thing that the seller still must pay for? Well, it can be negotiated, but that's typical for a veteran. Anybody know?
It used to be the termite inspection, but it's no longer. They changed that rule.
But a lot of people still put it in.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah. So be that if you think like you'll see it, it's like I said, it is, you can negotiate that, but many people go, well, I'll just go ahead and pay for that anyway. And they do. Okay. So now we've got backup verbiage. So there's two backup contracts here, or clauses here rather. And the first one is a little bit, you know, just not as detailed. And I would say probably a buyer would use this one. It's a backup offer subject to and contingent upon the release and the rights and obligations created under a pending executory contract to the purchase real estate between the seller and a third party, whoever has the other contract. This backup offer may be rescinded by the buyer at any time prior to the receipt of notice from the seller of a waiver of this condition. So this one down here is much more detailed, and it basically says you're a backup offer at any time that the buyer can rescind and just say, hey, you know what, we don't want to be in backup position anymore. And what it talks about in here is that the buyer has to understand that at any time the seller could say, hey, you're in contract. The primary fell through, you're up. It also talks about like they would have all their timelines start once the secondary contract or the backup contract goes into a primary position. And that too can be negotiated. If you want somebody in a backup offer to go ahead and do their inspections when they go into contract, you can ask for that as a seller. But what has to be understood by the backup position is if, let's say, I go into backup position on a home and I'm still out looking because I'm not sure I'm going to become the primary contract. Well, if I go out and I get into contract with another house, I darn well better make sure that my offer number one, where I'm the backup offer, I've either rescinded it or I make the offer that I'm writing on contingent on my release from the backup position on house number one. Because if you got the call, you negotiate, you get house number two, and that same day you get, hey, guess what? You just went into the primary position. You are now buying two houses. Does that make sense? Yeah, ouch. So make sure you either get out of one completely before going to number two, or make number two contingent on getting out of number one.
When would it be advantageous to make it contingent as opposed to just rescinding it?
Well, if you weren't sure. I mean, if I wasn't sure that I was going to get house number two and I didn't want to like get out of the position of being in the backup position, I might have fought for that. I had a house go into contract on Monday and it was a fight to be a backup offer. So if I had to fight to be a backup offer, but I know these people are probably still looking because the chances of getting this house are not great.
Yeah.
But if that were the case, then I would probably make offer number two contingent on release.
Gotcha.
But that might hurt it gets tricky because that might
hurt your chances. Yeah.
Right. So I guess
buyer would just need
which house you really want.
Yeah.
Can you rescind that at any time? If you're the backup, you can say, I'm out.
Anytime. Yep. You can rescind it at any time.
And that's in writing. You need to.
You can rescind it at any time before you're put into the primary position.
Right.
Yeah. And that would be something that you would want to put in writing.
And that's just an email, correct?
It can be. It's like I had to rescind, on Father's Day, I had a house go into contract. We had sent out a counteroffer, and all of a sudden I got a great offer in, and I was panicking. And so in our repertoire of forms, we don't really have anything that has like an official rescission. So I immediately just wrote it on an additional terms and conditions, and I wanted signatures on it. So I called my folks real fast and I said, look, we need to act super fast. I just sent you additional terms and conditions to offer number one. that says, this is legal notification that we are rescinding our offer at 5:02 on June 17th, 2020. Apologize, but you know, it is what it is. Got it signed, and the minute it was signed and sent, I was safe. But you've got to act fast on those. And I use the additional terms and conditions. We were discussing that same situation in our team meeting, and they said, well, why didn't you use an addendum? And I said, well, an addendum is actually after you've been accepted as the purchase contract. You hadn't been accepted. So the only form that I could get my hands on PDQ was additional terms and conditions. And it worked. It worked.
And you had sent a counter offer. Yep. They just didn't accept it yet. So then you said, beep, we're out.
And it was probably 20 minutes after I'd sent it, and the agent to this moment is still kicking herself saying, all I had to do was get those signatures. So if you're representing a buyer and you do have, you know, counters going back and forth, guys, get them signed as soon as you're able, because they can be rescinded. Someone can take them away from you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, investment property. This is a great clause. So if you're working with an investor, and this is a great one to protect your investors. It says this offer is contingent upon buyer's satisfactory review of all leases, rental agreements, deposits for the past, you could probably go back 2 years, income and expense reports within, this takes some time. So I would probably take 14 calendar days after acceptance of this offer. Seller shall provide such documents and information representing them to be true and accurate within 14 days after acceptance. During the pendency and term of this contract, seller shall not change any existing lease, enter into any new leases, or make substantial alterations or repairs, because they could make a huge repair, and then you're buying the property, and then you would be stuck with the consequences. Failure to notify the buyer and the seller and the broker in writing within the calendar days, 14 calendar days, shall constitute an election to proceed. So you got to keep on top of this. And if you lost track and you were like, oh yeah, we should probably get out of this, not sure that I really want to go in that based on what we're just sent. It's up to you to remember that you have to terminate the contract. How many signatures? How many do we need, buyer and seller, on a termination, or can a buyer just terminate a contract?
Oh, right.
Can a buyer and a seller, or just a buyer, what signatures are needed to terminate a contract?
Just buyers.
Mm-hmm. Well, then why do we have to have 2 signatures on a mutual release?
Because the seller has to agree.
But we just said to terminate, it only needs a buyer. What do they have to agree on?
The release of the earnest money.
Bingo. So if that's why a lot of people don't do earnest money these days, because to terminate a contract, a buyer just has to say, sorry, Charlie, notice of termination, 1 signature. If there's any earnest money, then we have to have both signatures. The buyer and the seller both have to agree. It's very, very important that your buyers understand that. Okay. All right. Okay. So here's multiple offers. And this is the seller's indisputable right to choose. This is not used a lot, but it actually could be these days. If one of those super, super hot properties were out there, and it basically says that the seller can just pick and choose who they want. It says they've received multiple offers at 123 Fair Avenue. Seller is submitting counteroffers to more than one. So they're like, hey, I'm going to send you a counteroffer, and you a counteroffer, and you a counteroffer, which we would typically never do, because you always say, well, you can sell the house twice. Well, they're saying, hey, we're doing it. Prospective purchaser, here we're notified that the counteroffers may contain identical terms and conditions. Seller reserves the right to accept any offer to make counteroffers to any other person. So it's kind of giving them carte blanche on being able to go out there and execute a contract. And then once they come back in, they can choose. It's their indisputable right to choose. So like I said, that's something we typically don't use, but it doesn't mean that you can't use it. And you have to reconfirm with the offer that you do decide. So maybe I have 3 offers out there, then I have to reconfirm in writing, like, hey, number 2, you're the winner. Okay.
And how would you do that, Tracy?
With a counteroffer is usually how they do it.
Okay.
Okay, so these two are the same. It's just contingent on suitable housing for the seller. They're just written differently. This refers back to if there's any earnest money involved, 12.3, that the earnest money would be returned to the buyers in the event that this contract or this clause was not fulfilled. So right now, let's just say I want to sell my house. I want to take advantage of this hot season. And I want to get it on the market. I still haven't found the right house. I put my house on the market and I put this clause back to the buyers and say, yes, you can have my house, you win, but I need X amount of days. I mean, you have to fill that in. I need 45 days. I need 60 days to find that right house. And at the end of that 60 days, then I would have to, you know, be out of the house. And that would tie in with your closing dates as well. But you're basically just saying, hey, I need to find a suitable housing for myself. Okay, makes sense?
And is that like 60 days to get in contract or to close?
It would be 60 days after the acceptance. So within 60 days, 60 calendar days after acceptance, I have the ability to execute this contract. So to go to closing. So maybe that would give me 30 days to find a house. I'm buying a month to buy a house and then closing in, you know, 30 days.
Gotcha.
Okay.
So it's 60 days from start to finish.
Could be 90.
Or whatever that time frame is. That's to actually close on the house, not to actually get in contract.
Right. It's to execute the contract.
Okay.
Okay, this is an old clause that used to be like, it was a battle, and here's what happened was, so every buyer's agent who wrote a purchase contract always put in the mechanical clause, and it made perfect sense. And I still saw one just not too long ago, and it said all appliances and mechanicals, including but not limited to electrical, plumbing, HVAC, roofing, drainage, blah 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 blah, are to be in working order at the date and time of possession. That makes perfect sense. I want them working at the time of possession. But then if you saw that clause come through, every agent who had a brain in their little skull would write the rejection clause, which would say the mechanical clause requested by the buyer is unacceptable and deleted. Buyers are to satisfy themselves as to the condition of the mechanicals through their inspections and tests. Issues relative to mechanicals, as with any request to remedy, are subject to the provisions of the paragraph property inspections and tests. So why would I immediately want to reject the mechanical clause? What could happen? Any ideas? Because
It could break the same day of possession and you didn't have anything to do with it.
Or what if, yes. So what if I'm in my final walkthrough and I happen to bring my dad, who's an electrician, and he opens up the breaker box. Now I've already been through all my tests and inspection, and you open up the breaker box and he's like, holy moly, this whole thing is a mess and you need to have this repaired. And this is not in proper working order. Now, Mr. Seller had signed the purchase contract that said everything, all of the electrical are to be in proper working order at the date and time of possession. Well, now I could be buying a $3,000 new electrical box. So it just opened up like, look, we can't control what happens after the inspections to the time of closing, and something could happen. But guess what? That if you have your inspections, that's when you have to satisfy that time. You can't just keep, you know, going back and back and back and saying, well, now this is wrong and this is wrong and this is wrong. Now, if something would break, well, of course the seller has an ethical and legal duty to disclose that. But this was just opening up a huge can of worms. So we always say, if you see a mechanical clause come in anymore, I would delete it. Okay, buyer's cap on the request to remedy. So some people use this. I think it can be a little confusing, but it basically is saying that, hey, during the request to remedy, we're not going to nickel and dime you for the little stuff. In the event the items per the buyer's inspection standard or test are less than $1,000, then the seller will not be responsible for any of these. So, Mr. Seller, we're not gonna, bother you about a broken seal or if the boot has come released on the side of the yard where the drain pipe is. And it makes them feel better about accepting your offer. Most contracts, I feel these days, if you're in a multiple offer situation, if they're comfortable with it, are just sending out no request or remedies. I'll have my home inspection, and if I find things that I'm not comfortable with, I can get out of the contract. But I'm not going to ask you, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, to repair anything going forward.
Tracy, do you ever do this dollar amount per item? So for instance, because this $1,000 in aggregate is one thing, but sometimes I think about it a little differently with, like if each individual item is less than $1,000 or, because that $1,000 in aggregate could amount very quickly.
Sure could. And I've seen it the opposite direction too. I've said that we won't ask for anything over. I mean, this is less than. What if I said, hey, if we do a request a remedy and we're not going to ask you for anything, like we would cap our request a remedy to $1,500. Mm-hmm. So there's no fear of us saying, oh my gosh, we need $5,000 worth of work done on the house.
Right.
Yeah. So you can do either way. It just gets a little bit more confusing. Well, we already did that one. So closing costs, we don't see this very often these days, but a lot of first-time home buyers are credit rich and cash poor, and their credit is great and they can buy a house and they qualify for $175,000, but they don't have the cash to bring to closing. And it doesn't really matter to the seller because from his proceeds, chances are he's going to have maybe $20,000. Well, if he's got $20,000, I'll just give $5,000 of it to the buyer's closing costs and inflate the price of the house by $5,000. Now, if you're worried that the house isn't going to appraise and that would make a difference, then that, might come into play. But it basically is saying seller agrees to pay at closing up to a minimum of $2,000 for all allowable closing costs and or discount points. Now, we always want to make sure that if this number is a large number, because it doesn't matter the price of the house. Some people have said, well, closing costs are a percentage of the price of the house. Not really. If I have a $100,000 house and I have a $300,000 house, it's not like it's 3%. It's like $3,000 of closing costs that will be needed for the $100,000 and $9,000 would be needed for the $300,000. No, closing costs are about $3,000 to $4,000, whether it's a $100,000 house or a $300,000 or $400,000 or $500,000 house. But if I put a large number in here, let's say I put $5,000 in there and they can't use all of the allowable closing costs. I've paid for the home inspection. I've paid for the loan application. I've paid for everything that I can. Then that money, that balance, and I use $3,000 of the $5,000, that money would go to waste unless I put in there and or discount points. So I always just make it a rule to always, always, always ask for closing costs and discount points. So if there's anything left over, the lender can take that money and buy down the rate.
What about escrows and impounds?
Sure. It's all allowable closing costs, but that would fall under that umbrella. It could be your escrows. Sure. Does that make sense?
I think that's why people do it as a percentage because of those, because closing costs are, of course, title fees, lender fees, but it's the impounds and the escrows that really bump that number up.
But, depending on the lender and how he wants to use those closing costs, they can use it for whatever they want.
Okay.
Okay. If you are an agent and you're buying or selling your own house, you have to say that I'm a licensed realtor in the state of Ohio. Okay, so here's that I have to sell my house to buy your house. And we have addendum A, which is for the sellers, and we have addendum B, which is for the buyers. And there's only these paragraphs are exactly identical except for one line, which is this line highlighted under the buyers. So B for buyers. So chances are you're gonna use it more, addendum B, because you're gonna use this when the buyer has to sell their house to buy another one. So let's go through this one because this one's a tricky one. It says buyer's current residence located at 123 Fair Avenue within, this is missing something. This is really weird. Buyer's obligations are contingent upon sale and closing, I missed that line, of buyer's current residence at blah, 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 within probably 60 days. It could be 45, but it's going to be hard to get it in contract and on the market and closed in 30 days. So I would probably go 45 to 60 days. It's agreed that the seller's property may remain on the open market. So we're still going to be on MLS. In the event the seller receives another acceptable written, that's not verbal, written offer to purchase, this contract shall terminate and the deposit shall be returned to the buyer unless the buyer, I always like to see 24 hours here. They can make up their minds in 24 hours. It doesn't need to be 48 or 72. From receipt of written notification of another offer by the seller to the seller's agent. Okay, so they have the house on the market, and they have 24 hours to say, you can do, Mr. Buyer, you can do the following things. One, remove this contingency in writing. And if you do remove that, you have to provide the seller with a letter from the buyer's prospective lender or other written evidence reasonably satisfactory to the seller that the buyer has the ability to buy the house or consummate this transaction is not conditioned upon the sale and close of the buyer's current residence. If the buyers elect to remove this home sale contingencies, all parties agree to close this transaction within 30 days after the written notice. Okay, now the only difference, like I said, is this. So up here, Mr. Seller, he doesn't care if the house has a home sale contingency. He may or may not care if the house has a home sale contingency. So I'm Mr. Seller and I have a house on the market and I've accepted this home sale contingency, okay? And another person comes along with a home sale contingency. Now this guy has a house in Old Arlington, and I know, or Grandview or Dublin for, you know, 300,000. I know that this house is going to sell in a heartbeat. My first home sale contingency that I'm bumping them with, you know, they may have a house out in the country and they're not getting many showings and it doesn't look good. So for me as Mr. Seller, I want to be able to bump offer number one with another offer that also has a home sale contingency. Now, Mr. Buyer's like, no, that's not fair. I will only be bumped if you get another offer that doesn't have a home sale contingency, which makes sense. Hey, this guy's coming along, his house, he doesn't have a house to sell. So yes, I should be bumped. So if you're representing the buyer, you want to make sure that you put this in here so that you're like, hey, if I'm going to get bumped, then bump me with somebody that doesn't have a house to sell. Mr. Seller may not care if he's going to bump you, if the other house that's going to bump you is a better house. That was a really roundabout way of explaining that. Did that make sense?
Yes, it did.
Okay.
I have a lot of questions though, Tracy.
Go for it.
Well, first, are you done explaining this?
Yep.
Okay. Number one, the successful sale and close of the property, right? So, because I've heard this 10 different ways. Successful close of the property means to me that in order for us to start our contract as a buyer, in order for my contract to commence, I need to close on my house that I'm selling first,
right?
Which means that could be another 30 days.
Yeah, that's why they usually put 60 days here. 30 days to get it in contract and 30 days to close.
So I can't even get started on the purchase of the next house until my house sells, which means that the buyer on my house has to wait 30 days to get possession of my house after they buy it.
No, No. So let's just say I have a hot little house in Dublin and I could put 40 days here. And I put her on the market, it goes into contract, and I have 30 days to close. So the whole thing would be done with offer number, with me selling my house in 40 days. And then I'm going to do back-to-back closings. I'm going to take the money from that one and close on my new house. So
Okay, that's exactly my point. So this is what people don't understand. Okay, is that you don't have to close buyer. I'm talking in buyer's terms. You don't have to close on your house first in order to buy the second one, like timing wise. It happens simultaneously, because that sentence is a little misleading, because it's saying that I have to close on my house first in order for that contract to commence.
but I do. I have to have the wire funds in my account, or I can't buy the next house unless I've got cash in the bank. Why would I need to sell my house? And I do have to close. I do have to close on my current residence. I have to get it on the market. I got to get it for sale, and I got to close on it. Take the proceeds from that and buy your house.
Yes.
And that happened in the same day?
Yeah, it happened. Absolutely. They need a couple hours in between.
Okay, but my point is that a lot of people understand this as buyer has to put their house on the market, get it sold in order for the house that they're buying, in order for that contract to start.
Oh, no. No. I see what you're saying. Absolutely not. It'll be simultaneously.
Okay, so talk to me about how you handle the, how you handle the status on MLS, you as a listing agent.
Well, if we're going to play by the rules, I have to show it in contract, contingent on, within
Escape.
And I'm not going to get any showings. And I know that. And I'm going to tell Mr. and Mrs. Seller, say, if we accept this contract that is contingent on the sale of their house and it has an escape on it, not a lot of people like to get involved in that. And they're afraid they're going to fall in love with the house. And then the people come forward and then they don't get the house, blah, 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 blah. I'd rather just not show the house. It happens. So there are some people at Marysville that they call it a zero bump. And basically the zero bump is there's no, like, you still show it as active. It's the only place I've ever heard this happens. But a zero bump clause is you have it as active, and then when the people, they don't have 24 hours. You just call them and say, you're out. You're out. There's a zero bump clause. I don't think it's probably kosher to do, but I've heard and seen it done.
So here's what I just dealt with, and this is why you're teaching this class. I had an agent who, number one, thought that what I asked you, like my buyers needed to sell their house, completely sell it, close, deal, done, and then their contract would start. And then she also wanted to keep the property active in the MLS.
That's not fair.
So we had to I had to have a come to Jesus meeting with her. And I said, okay, you can have it active until my buyer gets their house on the market. Once their house is on the market, then it's contingent escape. And then once their house gets into contract, then I want since we're playing ball, then as soon as we get in contract on my buyer's house, then I want your status to be contingent finance and inspection.
Yeah.
So it was literally contingent escape for one day.
Yeah.
Because my buyer's house went into contract in less than 24 hours. But to get her to agree to that because of how she understood this clause was a nightmare.
And I think, Lisa, you have to pick up the phone and walk some agents through this one, and it can be a nightmare.
No, she felt like she needed to walk me through it. And she's been in business 2 years and I'm on year 5. And so I just feel like it's really, really important that people understand this clause. And also, Tracy, I want you to talk about timelines, okay? Because another thing that I had to talk to her about is I don't want my buyers doing, because you're playing wonky, I don't want them doing inspections on the house. I don't want the appraisals not getting ordered. Nothing is getting done until we get that contingent escape timeline gone.
Okay, so I think there's two ways to look at that. What if you say, okay, because I've seen contracts written where it says, all home inspections or all inspections and, you know, deadlines will begin when the home
Home
sale
sale contingency is removed.
released. What if I'm the homeowner, the seller, and I give you, and it's not this market where you sell overnight, but let's just say, okay, it takes you 30 days to get your house in contract. I gave you 60, it takes you 30. Now you start, your timeline starts, you go in, you do your home inspection and go, oh, I don't want the house. Now I've taken my house off the market for 30 days.
Yeah.
And that's not fair. So in my world, I say, if you're serious, Mr. Buyer, and you want this house, and I know you're taking a chance of pay $350 to do that home inspection, but that's what it's going to cost you, because I want you to know what you're buying. And if you're not happy with the condition of the house, you need to know now. Because Mr. Buyer, what happens now, you've got your house in contract and you find out you don't want this house.
Yeah.
So in my world, I believe that you should get that contract or that home inspection done 7 days, whether it be a regular, you know, contract or with a contingency, home sale contingency. I think it's super important.
So what is your definition of home sale contingency being removed?
When they're in contract, then the contract, then you're, and this is important. So then you have to write another clause that says, now it's contingent, not getting my house in contract, but it's contingent on the successful closing, which is covered in this one too. But I know a lot of agents go, okay, it's no longer contingent on the me getting my house in contract. Now it's contingent on the successful close of this house that we're in contract.
Which is
30 days to do that.
Which is the same as contingent, finance, and inspection, or pending, depending on what kind of deal you have. It goes right back into the normal contract language, right?
Yep, same thing.
But I don't feel like this clause addresses all of those questions that I just asked you.
It doesn't. It just takes, you know, working through them. And what's the difference between an in contract and a pending? Troy was talking about that yesterday. In my little mind, in contract means that I'm in contract contingent on finance and inspection. When I see a pending, that means that you are set to close. You have commitment, you've had your appraisal, and very few agents change it from in contract to pending. You just leave it as in contract and the way it goes. But that's my definition of pending. Yeah. And I know there's some other agents out there that have a different definition of pending.
Yeah. Or if it's cash, then there is no appraisal and there is no financing.
It could be pending.
Yeah.
Why would you not change it just because it's extra work?
You forget to do it and it's just extra work.
Oh, okay.
Plus you're, you know, I mean, I guess things could happen. And as a listing agent, I'm always trying to get a backup. I'm always trying to have my seller's best interest in mind. So I would no more show a pending than I would fly, but I would maybe show an in contract for backup. Who knows? Somebody could pass away the day before and then boom, you'd shown the house, but I wouldn't have shown it if it was pending.
Holy crap. You get so many different things that can happen.
Yes, you do.
Tracy, sale of your house as opposed to closing of the house. So when it says successful sale and closing, does that sale word, does that mean get it in contract?
Yes.
Okay, because to some people that doesn't mean that.
Well, otherwise it means the same thing. Sale and closing kind of related. So it should be sale and close. I mean, I guess in a perfect world it'd be contingent upon getting it into contract and closing it.
Yep.
Yeah, but that's what that means.
Okay, I'm glad I wasn't wrong.
You're not wrong. Okay, any other questions on addendum A or addendum B, and you understand the difference of why this is important for your buyers to say, no, don't throw me, you know, under the bus because I have a home sale contingency. I want somebody who's in the same boat as me not to bump me. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Clarification of financing contingency. It used to be that you could, like we would write in a purchase contract that like it was 80-20 loan to value, and some people would have a problem with the percentages that they had down on a loan. Nowadays, sometimes you can figure that out in a loan letter. Sometimes you can't, depending on the pre-qual. But this one, and this is an older one, buyers agree that by applying for the loan with any lender, buyers accept as satisfactory the lender's loan terms, interest rates, discount points, conditions. So if something happens, you go into contract, and your rate lock goes up, and now you're past your 90 days, and now it's like, uh-oh, it changed, so I'm going to get out of the contract. No. That's not fair. You had a lender letter, and if something changes with your loan, you're still locked in with me, Mr. Seller. Okay. All
I've
right.
never seen this clause before. That's super important.
Yeah, some people use it. Okay, so tax proration clause and tax proration clause for new builds. So this one's another tricky clause. So in our purchase contract, and it is on it's on the bottom of page 3. So it basically says under the taxes and assessments, you guys can go back through this. Under taxes and assessment, it says like, hey, you know what? The tax rate and valuation can change. Yes, your taxes are going to go up, Mr. Buyer. And all these adjustments that are made shall be final, except for the following. So when you get to closing and adjustments made, like on your taxes and everything, those aren't going to change except for in this instance, okay? And what that instance is, let's say I buy a house in German Village, and it's a pretty little house, and it's a $200,000 house, and my taxes are $6,000. Now I come along and I tear down the house beside it, and I build onto I make this house into a palace. And I add a story on top, and it becomes $1 million house. My taxes went from $6,000. Now my taxes are $20,000. Okay, so there's a big gap. So what this clause says, and the same thing can happen on a new build. And the new build is Mr. Seller has a lot, an empty lot, and there's nothing on it. And the auditor knows it's $300 a year in taxes. Well, Mr. Builder goes out there and builds a big old house on it. He built a $500,000 house on it. And that lot, those $300 taxes turn into $15,000 taxes. So another big spread. So what this paragraph is saying is like, hey, because our taxes are a year in arrears, the people who owned the house should pay for the taxes during the time that they owned it. Because what would happen is the tax bill comes out, and Mr. Auditor finds out that the tax bill that's coming out in January is for the following January to June. And that was when there was, it was only $6,000. But really now Mr. Auditor, when the house closes, says, woo, now our taxes are $15,000, let's change that. Well, your buyers would get the bill for half of their taxes, $7,500, and then another $7,500 during the time that Mr. Owner owned that house. Well, that's not fair. So this basically says that each one should pay for the time that they owned the house. And it says the parties acknowledge and understand that the amount of taxes charged for the time prior to the closing may change. Yes, your taxes are going to go up. It's the intent of the buyer and the seller that each shall pay for the real estate taxes due and billed for the period of the time that each owns said property. So you owned it then, you should pay for it. Therefore, parties agree that following the adjustments will be made after the closing, because this says right here, these adjustments shall be final. There are no adjustments. Your taxes are your taxes. There are no adjustments, except if we put this clause in. So within 10 days of receipt of the verification of the change, because your buyers are going to get a little letter from the auditor saying, hey, guess what? Your taxes went from $6,000 to $15,000. Seller shall reimburse the buyer for the difference between what was given. So they say, hey, we owed you $6,000. We credited that to you at the closing, but now the time our taxes, ooh, they just went up to 15. So we're going to owe you $9,000. And Mr. Seller has to realize this because he was the person that made the choice to turn the $200,000 house into $1 million property. So he had to understand that those taxes were going to go up and he was going to have to pay for that. So
Will that difference be due then?
well, the first half would be due on the next, it all depends on when it closed. So our taxes are January and June. So depending on when they looked at it, they can't give you the credit at closing because first of all, they don't know when the auditor is going to get to the site to say, oh, looky here, we've got more school money. They can't tell. So they don't know when that letter is going to come and they adjust it per diem. So it's based on 365 days. So that number would literally be per day what was owed to Mr. Buyer for the time that Mr. Seller owned the property.
Okay.
Involved.
Is there a way to figure out what the taxes should be? If you know that a seller has gone in and made all of these changes to the house and you know that the taxes don't reflect those changes, how do you determine what the taxes are going to be prior to in order for us to be able to know to use this clause?
Get the phone and call the auditor. They are so nice and they understand that and they can give you an estimate. I mean, a quick and dirty is 2%. I mean, they're all different. Like, I think Dublin's 2.6 and Powell's always been a little bit lower. It's 2.0 and Hilliard's 2.4. But if you just do a quick and dirty and say the house is $300,000 now and it was $100,000, it was probably $2,000. Now my taxes are $6,000. I mean, I'm going to know. I'm at least going to have enough wits about me to tell Mr. Buyer, hey, guess what? These taxes are going to go up. Let's get on the phone with the auditor and she'll give us an estimate.
Okay.
Oh, and there is an estimator online too. So
Does it work?
Oh, it's awesome. So if you go into Franklin County, it has tax estimator and it's going to take into consideration all the schools and the levies and any mills or anything that's out there that's happening. And you put the new proposed price in and it'll spit out what your new taxes will be.
And it's accurate.
Yeah.
I was afraid to use it.
No, it's
okay.
It's good. I mean, your buyers are, you're not going to say this is to the penny, but it's a real good estimate of what they're going to have to pay.
I round everything to the thousands anyway.
Well, there you go. Okay. This we really don't have to worry about anymore. The qualified inspector clause, if you didn't want Uncle Joe going in there and saying he was an inspector, you could put this in there. But as of July 1st, they're all going to have to be qualified inspectors. So this one will probably be on its way out. Signatures, mandatory, no offer, counteroffer, or addendum shall be considered accepted until actually signed. Phrases such as signatures to follow or per phone conversation shall be not be legally binding. Everybody used to go, signatures to follow. You just can't do that anymore. No. If you're working with a builder, you want to make sure that the BIA warranty, it's a little clause, but it's still a clause or a contingency that you want to make sure that you have a BIA warranty included in your sale of the home. Okay, so this is a new one that I just had Marie D'Onofrio write for us last week. And we had some agents putting in, it was a non-refundable money or earnest money deposit. Well, non-refundable means like, I don't get it back. Well, you do get it back if you close, but they were just writing in non-refundable in order to win a deal, $2,000 non-refundable earnest money. That was it. That's what everybody was putting in. Well, you just gave away $2,000. What if the deal didn't close? What if you still said you can keep my $2,000? That was a bad thing. So she wrote this, she's like, oh my gosh, you're right. So Marie put this together for us. It says earnest money deposit of $2,000 within 3 calendar days of accepted purchase contract, which shall be non-refundable deposit made payable to the seller and which will not be returned to the buyer for any reason. It's a little tricky here. Seller shall keep the earnest money even if a contingency is not fulfilled and the transaction does not close. Earnest money return references in paragraph blah, 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 blah are hereby deleted and will not be applicable. If the transaction closes successfully, the title company shall treat the earnest money as an amount paid by the buyer to the seller outside the closing, shown as a credit to the buyer on the closing disclosure, and thereby reducing the buyer's total amount. So they're saying, hey, if something happens and a contingency falls through, or we get cold feet and we don't close on this property, or you know, you'll keep the money. If our home inspection falls through, you keep the money. But if we close on the property, then we get the money back to be applied to our bottom line. Okay, so that's just to protect your buyers so that they're not just, you know, if the seller defaults, they just got $2,000. If you default, you give up your money. Okay,
Do you see that much?
please.
Do you see that often?
Non-refundable earnest money? Yeah. In multiple offer situations, you betcha. I'm seeing things like, hey, we'll pay for the title, we'll do this, we'll do that, crazy things. This is earnest money after home. Oh, we have this in the purchase contract now. I should have deleted that. We don't need that. Propane tanks. So if you sell in the country, guess what? Propane tanks and propane can be very, very expensive. So this contract is contingent on buyer satisfaction regarding the tank ownership. Many of them are leased. So you have to figure that out. The purchase price includes all propane presently contained in the propane tank, because some people will go have the tanks drained and your buyers get there, it's dead of winter, they turn on their heater and there's nothing there because the seller took all the propane in the tank. Not good. This is about post-closing possession. So right now with multiple offers, a lot of people are saying, hey, stay in the house for 45 days. We want the house. And if you need it, it's yours. Well, if it's anything past 3 to 5 days, I'm going to start charging rent. And I'm going to be talking about whose insurance policies in place. I'm going to be telling that the sellers, they probably need to get a renter's policy for their items. The house would be covered, but their things, if there was a fire, would not be covered. So this talks about that the sellers to obtain insurance coverage for the seller's possession and liability insurance from injury and damage because of the buyer's fall in the house, their general liability. So if you have anybody that's staying, this talks about insurance and like you're going to charge them. Usually it's their PITI. So you could figure out what they're going to be paying per day on their new home anyway, and then that would just go to the sellers.
Tracy,
Okay. Yeah.
Question about this. And I forget. I knew this at one point and then I forgot, so I need you to tell me again. There is. So once the house is sold and closed on, and you have post-closing possession, the insurance company that covers the house, because the sellers no longer own it. I know that there's a window. Isn't there a window or something that happens with whose insurance policy actually covers the house?
My understanding is it kind of overlaps for a day. And so that Mr. Sellers, the day of closing, Mr. Sellers ends that day and Mr. Buyer starts that day. So because the bank's not going to let that house sit there uninsured.
Right. So the buyer's coverage is covering the previous seller while they live there.
Oh, you mean if they stay there? I see what you're saying. No, the new buyer's coverage of the house kicks in the day they buy it. So that's what I'm saying. The house is covered because the new buyer's insurance covers the house. Now, the items in the house would not be covered. And that's why if they were staying for a longer period of time, the old sellers or renters at this point of the buyer's home would want to get renter's insurance to cover their personal chattel or their personal possessions.
Okay. I thought that there was, and I obviously this is why I needed this. I thought that there was an overlap or some kind of extension that they could get because the sellers had possession of the house, even though they didn't own it anymore.
You know what? I can check with my husband. He has an insurance license. I'll check with him on that.
Okay.
The sellers would end at 12:01 p.m.
Yeah.
The buyers would take effect at the time the contract closed. So that's how that works.
Yes.
And then there is an inland marine policy that would cover the contents, but it is a separate policy. And you'd want that to start at close, right?
Right at close.
Back to the propane tank. Is that part of the inspection, the amount of propane in there, or you just have to take somebody's word for it?
Usually it's hard to tell. Some of them have a dial and you can tell how much you have left. Usually it's the company that is taking and I would call let's just say it's Buckeye Propane, and they know the usage. So they automatically come out every 3 months, 6 months. So you would say, okay, when's they'll know about the usage of that propane tank based on the
That's
current.
smart.
Everybody uses amounts differently.
That's very smart.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So this is us saying that, title agency is going to provide the title insurance if you use title, because we are Title Connect, because we have a business affiliation with them. And then you would have to get the affiliated business disclosure signed if you had any kind of ownership with Title Connect. It's just always good to have. Earnest money deposit. This is new with COVID, meaning that instead of us passing checks back and forth, some of you may have already experienced this. Today I had it just the old-fashioned kind, check to check. Closing earlier in the week, it was just credited from my commission, and then it was reimbursed from the trust account into my commission. So the check the physical check didn't change hands, just the money amount went from our broker's trust account into the commission account to make it whole. Make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. This is for under fixtures and equipment. You want to make sure you always write all kitchen current appliances as seen on to include, and you want to be specific if you're worried about it. I mean, if you just put the kitchen appliances in there, or I want a refrigerator and a microwave, you may come into a house and the pretty stainless steel appliances may just have a black refrigerator and appliance. So always make sure that you're specific if you feel like somebody may do a switcheroo on you.
You
Tracy,
saved me on that one. Sorry.
Yeah.
What's that?
Okay. Go ahead.
I think all bathroom mirrors. I mean, if you think about a house, take a house, turn it upside down, you shake it. Anything that falls off the walls is fair game. So if I went and got a pretty bathroom mirror from Pottery Barn and hung it, well, that's not attached. I don't need any kind of tool to get that off the wall. I just take it with me like I would take a picture. A picture would leave a home. So might that mirror. So if you're a smart cookie, you'll put in all bathroom mirrors, front porch swings. They're just on a hook. If I shook the house, that front porch swing would disappear.
So I had one I was going to buy, and they took the generator, the whole house generator.
Well, no, that's not really attached. I get that.
It's not?
Right in an all-house generator. Yeah.
It's not attached to the house? How does it power the house if it's not attached? It has a separate electric panel.
But maybe I have a portable one. Mine, I just plug in at the time I need it.
Oh, this
It
one.
depends on the generator. But if in doubt, it doesn't matter. Like here, I don't know. If I have that question, write it in. Just always better safe than sorry. We had a house and it had, how did this work? It had this room and it was all a closet. It was beautiful. And they were strings, they had knots. And then all these cabinets were on it, but they weren't attached. And when the buyers went in, they were all gone, and they went to court over it, and they lost because there was nothing attaching them, and they left the strings, but they took all of the, the shelves. They weren't attached. So just in doubt, if you see anything like, you know, pan racks are always in the kitchen, or always a pain, or any kind of shelving in the lower level that they might want, or in the garage, or maybe they've taken the old kitchen and put it in the garage and they replaced the new kitchens in the kitchen, and you want that stuff in the garage, just write it in. It can't hurt. Write it in.
Tracy, I always put in, even though it says it in the list of things in the contract, I always put media brackets in that list of things too, because a lot of agents don't pay attention to the list. And they tell their sellers that, oh yeah, you can take them with you, or it's not even a question or anything that's discussed. But that's been a huge problem for me.
But I also believe that if you say, we want if you don't write in there, if they are going to take them, that, like we just did that on a house, and we put in the excluded under the MLS that they were going to take the media brackets.
And then repair the wall.
Repair the wall. Patch and repair the wall. It was funny how many agents came back and did say they would do it, and some did not. I'm like, yeah, bad mistake. Yeah, I mean, we have a pretty exclusive, you know, or inclusive rather, list here, but it can't always hurt to reiterate, like you said. Okay. Okay, so
not to beat a dead horse, but if that generator was there at the open house, shouldn't it have remained?
I love you, Marcia.
If it was
I'm sorry. Am I too nitpicky?
No,
it was at the open house.
Well, that wouldn't matter. I mean, was it a vacant house?
Huh?
Was it a vacant house?
Yeah, well, it was semi-vacant. They took almost everything out. Then they took the media brackets. They took everything. They were mad because they weren't getting what they wanted.
Yeah, that happens. That happens.
I didn't care.
Well, I don't know. That would be an interesting one, because supposedly if it takes a tool to get it out, and if you didn't just have to unplug that one and roll it away, then it should have probably stayed. But you also should always put it into the MLS, and always remember, like, I would hate it when agents write in there all items as designated on your MLS fact sheet. And I'm like, oh, did I make my fact sheet right? But remember, at the bottom of the fact sheet, it says, of the MLS fact sheet, it says, all information deemed to be correct, but something like, there can be like mistakes. I mean, there's a huge out on the bottom of the MLS pages.
Okay.
Okay, we already did that. Appraisal gap. In the event the home does not appraise for the agreed upon price, buyers agree to pay the difference between the appraised price and the purchase contract not to exceed. Okay, so if I'm paying a lot for the house, okay, I think the house is $200,000, but I've got an offer for $215,000. So, I mean, I could give you, in order to get the house, I'm going to say, well, I'm going to offer you $230,000. Well, I know as a buyer, it's not going to appraise for $230,000. I'm not going to have to pay for it. So if you're a smart seller, you're not going to take the $230,000 because it's not going to appraise. So agents now are putting in appraisal gaps, which basically say, hey, I'm on your page and I'm not sure this house is going to appraise either. So I will come out of pocket with cash and bridge the gap, because this is how much I want the house. So we'll see what the appraisal comes out, and I will bring cash to the closing, or cash, you know, to my lender, or I could put more money down on my down payment in order, if I can get it up to 20%, there won't be an appraisal. But basically they're saying I will work out the appraisal issues with cash. And that's a great thing to do. Okay, and last but not least, we have the escalation clause. Now, there's a very detailed escalation clause, which I would strongly suggest using, and then there's one that I see all the time. The escalation clause is, in the event of a multiple offer, buyer agrees to increase their offer in 1,500, let's just say it's $1,000 increments. I think it should be somewhat substantial there. Over and above the seller's highest net offer with the maximum price to be, you must have a cap not to exceed, let's say 200,000. And then you have to show a copy of the competing offer. And you don't show the whole offer. You would black out any names or pertinent information and just show the price with the escalation clause and the sign page at the end. But why is this important, guys, to have a net offer? Why is that there and why is that there? What do they mean by the net offer? The situation are they talking about?
Like if a offer is asking for closing costs or asking for the seller to pay for home warranty, that takes away from their proceeds.
Right. So let's say it's a $200,000 house. They've got $5,000 in closing costs. Well, that's really the net offer is $195.
Right.
So the person that has the next competing offer, it's $1,000 higher. Well, it wouldn't be 201. It would be 196. Okay. So it's got to be the net offer. Otherwise, you're paying for money that they're already getting back. It just wouldn't make sense. It wouldn't be fair. So that's kind of like
I've won a multiple offer situation simply because of the word net. And the agent said, Lisa, had you not put in that net word, you wouldn't have got it. But
that's right. Yeah. It's really, really important.
important.
So this is the escalation clause. I know, Lisa, you use this and we use this, and it basically is a detailed escalation clause, which it needs. And what the difference is it basically says the same thing, right, as up above. Says, hey, you know what? Seller is going to go up in $2,000 increments, not to exceed 350. You got to have a cap. And then it says, in the event other offers cause the escalation of the sales price in this offer, the seller will provide with a copy of the offer to justify the price. You have to do that. And then it says here, you're going to go back and you don't just sign the offer. You have to go back. The seller does when they receive an escalation clause and says, I'm going to come back with a counter offer. So we're all on the same page. And we now understand, because escalation clauses can be like, I think it's one thing, but you think it's another. Well, I better be darn sure that we both agree that the price was, $348,000. So you send that back to the buyers in a counteroffer form saying, hey, this is what we agreed upon, that the net offer with the escalation is going to be fully executed at $348,000. Then it's crystal clear. Otherwise, there's always a doubt like, wait, what is the price? And for the lender too, because the lender doesn't want to go through all those pages and the title company doesn't want to go through all those pages going, what is the price of this house? This just clarifies it. Okay. And that is the end of our clauses.
And the counteroffer is a new contract, right?
No, it's not a new contract. It's just an extension of it. It's just, I'm countering, I guess you could say it's a new contract, but it's just countering where we are as far as some term of the contract, whether it be price or condition or what. It's an extension of the contract that you have.
Can you send this to us?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
As is the additional terms and conditions, Tracy. Let me ask for your opinion of this, because I had a discussion with an agent about this. Additional terms versus addendum.
Okay, addendum means I'm in contract. Additional terms means I haven't come to terms yet.
Yeah.
Additional terms and conditions of the contract. Now, once I'm in contract, then I can change something with an addendum. Addendum means I'm adding to. Adding to, but you must be in contract, because if you look at an addendum, the top of the addendum says, this is a contract addendum, and we went into contract on this date.
Yeah.
Right at the top of that an addendum. So you have to be in contract.
Yeah, this was an agent that had been in business for like over 20 years, and she was arguing with me about, because she sent me additional terms and conditions after we were in contract, and I'm like, what do you want me to do with this? So you need to put this in an addendum. And she was like, no, these are additional terms and conditions to the contract. And I'm like, well, that's what an addendum is for. But,
this is an additional terms and conditions, and it's just a continuation of the terms and condition. If I go back And
Of an offer to purchase, not a contract, right?
right. So if I go back and I look at, let me just add something here, back to my loop, and add a addendum. Do I have an addendum?
Right there. Yeah.
Where?
Right above.
At
Right there.
contract addendum. So
How long
now,
does it take to get comfortable with all this?
what's that?
How long does it take to get comfortable with all this?
Not long. We're all here to help you. Okay, so right here it says accepted contract date. So that tells me right there that I'm already in contract. So this is just on top of, hey, by the way, I want this too. And this addendum supersedes any conflicting provisions. So this is gonna, say, hey, let's just say that the house doesn't appraise and there was no appraisal gap. So we have to go back and say, hey, everybody, purchase price to be $350,000. So it topped the appraisal price that I had at $355. It is now, it's superseding the purchase contract that was in place.
Mhm.
Tracy, can I have your email?
Tell you what, if you guys want a copy of that, I mean, those are all in here, but if you would like a copy of that Word document that we just went through, yeah, email me with your email and then I'll have it. It's tchambers@kw.com, super easy.
I'm sorry, T.
tchambers, CHAMBERS at KW.
Here's a question that doesn't have anything to do with the contract, but I had an illegal alien, but I didn't know it. So I sent her to get pre-approved before I started on the showing. And I referred her to an immigration attorney.
Okay, that'll work.
Should I have asked other questions before I even referred her?
That's a little touchy, and that's a hard one to. I mean, we address it in our purchase contract as far as being a foreign seller. It's not really addressed in the purchase contract as being a buyer, but we do always say that when you come to closing, you either have to have a driver's license, proof of residency, or a green card. So
Well, they don't need to be a citizen to get a driver's license, or they don't even have to have a green card anymore.
well, then I guess you have to have proof of citizenship. Isn't that a green card? Am I being stupid?
No. I'm the one that's stupid. I never in my wildest dreams did I think that she would be, I mean, she's just the nicest girl. I had no idea. And then I was like, well, I didn't want to be, I was extra careful. I just referred her to the lender because the lender weighed that out. And then I was like, well, maybe I should have asked before I even started. But then I wasn't sure how I would ask that question.
Yeah, that's tricky.
And then when I talked to the immigration attorney, she told me I was better off not asking.
Oh, really?
Yes.
I mean, I don't see what the problem would be saying, hey, are you a U.S. citizen? I mean, would that be a bad thing?
The way I did it was I just said, here's the list from the mortgage lender of what they require, and that requires a green card. So I figure I was okay there, but I thought, well, I don't want to cause any trouble for the brokerage, and I don't want to get 3/4 of the way down the pipeline and find out.
You do not want to do that. Waste your time and efforts, and they're not able to purchase a home. Yeah, I totally agree with that.
Well, she'll be back. She's called the immigration attorney already. I mean, it's just going to take longer. I just didn't want to cause any trouble. Too many complications.
You're not going to cause trouble.
You promise? Brave lady. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Tracy, thank you.
Purchase contract questions, holler. I love the purchase contract and know it pretty well. So just shout out and I can help you with that.
Thank you, Tracy.
Thank you.
It was great as always.
Talk to you guys later.
Bye.
Bye.